Ground Zero, the place where faith is formed and tested, where character is developed and challenged, where vision is focused and dreams are born. Join us as we step onto Ground Zero.
Yeah, so my name is Zachary Welch. I am better known as Emily's brother. I am a nurse at a downtown hospital up here in Indianapolis. I work in the ICU. Normally, it's a neuro ICU. Takes care of strokes, brain tumor resections, injuries like that. But we've been repurposed as a COVID response unit.
So when did the repurpose happen? Was that recently or what time frame are we looking at here?
It's been in the last week as the hospital's seen more and more cases. There needs to be ICU beds available. And with, like most hospitals in the United States right now, we've cut elective surgeries, elective procedures, moved everyone who can be moved out of the hospital. And we've got a large pool of beds available and staff available. So we became a unit that's qualified and ready to take COVID patients.
So this is just something that you're preparing for the future, basically. I say future, but we're looking in the next couple of weeks is what you're preparing for. It's not right now, like you're a COVID unit, but you're not actively.
We are currently taking care of COVID patients, yes.
Okay. I know this has all happened very quickly. Would you rewind just maybe to the beginning when we first started hearing about this coming out of Europe and Asia, all of these things? Can you rewind a little bit and tell us about the beginning of all of it at the hospital and just give us a little snapshot of what it looked like there?
Yeah, so I mean, COVID-19 was like first discovered. I don't want to be wrong here, but I think it was November of 2019, which is why it's got the name COVID-19 is discovered in the year 2019 in Wuhan, China, as most people probably know now. And as far as the hospital, I mean, that was business as normal in November and December, getting ready for the holiday rush that we normally have and going into the more winter season, severe weather. We get more of your big car accidents with inclement conditions. So the normal ICU pace, as we fast forward faster into 2020, it became kind of just a topic of conversation at work. Oh, isn't that crazy?
Sure.
Stuff like that. Nothing, no formal plans, nothing really, no one taking it, at least on my level, very seriously until we started seeing the reports coming out of China, finally getting the real information coming from there, getting information out of Europe, especially Italy, just how quickly the virus spreads and just looking numbers wise, how many patients we were going to see if it came to the United States, which in the way the world's set up today, it's almost impossible for a virus like this to not make it everywhere.
Right. And I think that's a good talking point as we've had some conversations. And of course, as I've talked to a lot of people in our community and other communities around the world via the internet, things like that, I think since the beginning, there are a lot more people that understand why this is such a scary situation right now. But I think there was a lot of misunderstanding at the beginning that this was scary because of the mortality rate. Can you speak to that a little bit and about why in your profession, why this is actually so scary?
Yeah. So from the research I've done and using sites like the cdc.gov, Johns Hopkins has great resources for all things COVID. So that's primarily where my information comes from. It's looking like the virus itself isn't necessarily deadly. What comes into fact is it makes people really, really sick. And when you have that many people requiring hospitalization, ventilators, life support, until your body's able to fight it off itself, that's when the mortality starts to climb. You'll see if you look at South Korea, they have a mortality rate around 0.9% because they did a really good job of testing the population, isolating, and then not overwhelming the hospitals. There's all kinds of campaigns talking about flattening the curve, which talks about exponential graphs, and you're looking at the number of cases coming into the hospital. And the whole point of social distancing and shutting down the state of Indiana and putting all of us essentially in quarantine is to limit the number of cases coming in all at once, because that's where you'll get into situations like you see in Italy, where you have a mortality rate around 10%, mainly because the hospitals are overwhelmed. They don't have the resources, staff, beds, ventilators to help support people as their body gets really sick and fights the infection, the virus on its own.
Sure. That's great information. So regarding, I mentioned social media, but regarding that, can you tell me what kind of effect that has? You deal with a lot of family members up into a certain point, obviously, when the hospitals stop allowing visitors, right? But can you tell me maybe overall what the effect of social media disinformation and misinformation is on your job, and then maybe give a few words about that surrounding COVID-19 specifically?
Yeah, so social media is a great tool and resource that's allowed us to be a lot more connected. That's why we're able to do this interview right now. However, the downfall with it is everyone can put their thoughts and feelings on the internet. And when it comes to issues that affect the whole globe, there is a lot of disinformation out there. I think the important thing is to not just press retweet, share, like on whatever you read. CDC, Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, there's a wealth of great information out there. And it's also important to remember with social media that when someone posts about their experience with COVID, that's one person's experience. That's not what is being seen everywhere. My experience that I'm seeing at the hospital is not the same thing being felt in New York or LA or Miami or Houston or Santa Claus, Indiana. So I think the most important thing is don't take everything you see and read as gospel. And if you really want to find out exactly what's happening, the best sites are always, the CDC has a phenomenal database tracking all things COVID.
Excellent. Thank you. So we're going to shift gears just a little bit. And obviously we're a church, we're a United Methodist Church, and I know you're a Christian, and I wondered if you would tell us a few minutes about your faith, about experience with God, and then some follow-up questions with that surrounding COVID-19 also.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate to be raised in the church and always in a Christian background, and really have those roots planted early for my faith, which I've always been appreciative of. And my faith right now is something I'm very appreciative of in terms of what we're seeing and dealing with every day at the hospital. It is scary. I'm sure all the news is coming across about the lack of protective equipment for healthcare workers and just how easily this virus is spread. There's all kinds of research that says the number one predictor for negative outcomes with COVID right now is the amount of exposure. And so anyone working in healthcare is going to be exposed a lot. So it's scary from that point. But I mean, the best thing is, as everything's going crazy in this world, we know that this world isn't our final home, and that God has a plan. God's in control. And the most important thing for me is, I believe in the power of Jesus, and that when I die on earth eventually, be it from whatever circumstances, that I believe that I'll be in heaven, and that's going to be a better place, which makes it a lot easier to walk into the rooms every day and take care of something that could eventually kill me. I don't think that's likely, but it's definitely a possibility. So that's what I've been relying on, is just the strength of, God has a plan. He's been very intentional about putting me where I need to be to serve his will. And so if that means, working in this environment, and if that leads to me getting really sick, then And that was his plan all along.
So what you're saying basically is that even through the devastation, the pain, and I know this is Indianapolis and places like Texas and New York are getting hit much harder than we are right now. I know that the expectation is there that it's going to maybe get a little worse over the next couple of weeks, but even through the pain and the hurt and the devastation that you see on a daily basis, you're able to remain faithful to God.
Yeah, it's not unlike any of the other tragedies that have befallen Earth all the way since the fall of man. Are the history of our races one with tragedy built in. You can all through the formative years of my life, you can look back to different periods of time and pick the tragedy that's kind of shaped that form of your life. 9/11 is a great example for a lot of people my age, because those are some of our first formative memories. You're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and something that magnitude happens, it definitely shapes the way you view the world. And I feel like this is going to be one of those events that just shapes the way you view the world. And through all of that time, God's been faithful. So I see no reason why he's not going to be faithful now.
Awesome. So just in wrap up, my last question for you is if you could give us one piece of advice for the next week. It seems like information changes day to day. Even our brightest and most intelligent and educated doctors seem to be learning through this entire process. And so part of the reason I think information has been so hard to garner is because, this is just me, but they have disagreed at points and they've just been learning. But if you as a nurse, professional nurse, if you could give us one piece of advice over the next week, what would that be?
I mean, the thing that's going to be best for society and as individuals is to continue following the stay-at-home instructions. Stay home, don't go out, limit the amount of exposure you have when you have to go out to get groceries. Make sure that you're just staying distant from people. Don't be up on each other. 6 feet is about the distance that the CDC recommends, making sure that everyone stays out of that bubble. If you feel sick, don't go out. That's the most important thing. If you feel sick, call your doctor, call your healthcare provider. They're going to be the best ones to guide you in terms of how to manage. If this is just the flu, do you need to come in? All of that. So that's number one thing, is just stay at home, enjoy this time at home, and just contain the spread of the virus to help our hospitals the best we can.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for your time, Zach.
Yeah.